Hi guys, welcome. My name is Aura Vasquez. Welcome so much to the to my VTH, my virtual town hall meetings. And today we're celebrating 420 and cannabis with an incredible human being that I know, a friend of mine, and someone that was a huge part of making sure that cannabis was established and legalized. But there is so much more to cannabis that than just this conversation. So I wanted to invite her to make sure that we have a candid conversation about cannabis. And happy 420 for all of you that that. Hi, Lynne. Okay, here it is. Mute your phone. Hi. We got Lynne is. Lynne, completely mute your phone. Put your volume completely down and mute it.
On the side.
Bear with us.
How's that?
I think that's perfect. If you guys on the chat can hear me fine, can you make sure? I can still hear an echo. But
How do I mute on Instagram?
I hear you fine on Instagram now. You're good. I don't know if the people. I can still hear the feedback. Okay, we'll deal with it.
Do you want me on the phone or do you want me on the computer?
So we have you both. Lynne, here. We see you on both. So what I would recommend is for you to put maybe your phone right next to your computer. And then also lower the volume on your computer if you can.
I think I have it muted completely on my computer.
Oh, something went really well because now.
There you go.
Awesome. Welcome to the combo. Welcome to we call this, and actually this was a great conversation Lynne and I had earlier. We call this a Smokeside shot. And I wanted to bring you in to talk about legalization. I think a lot of people know that now we can have recreational use of cannabis or weed or marijuana or pot, whatever you guys call it. But a lot of people don't know how this came about. Some of us know, and some other people don't. So you work for, when I first met you, you were with the Drug Policy Alliance. And I have been an advocate for the legalization and decriminalization of cannabis for a really long time. And tell us a little bit about how you got to do this type of work.
Hi, Aura. Thank you. Nice to be with you here. I have been working in criminal justice reform for over 20 years, so I really came to marijuana legalization and cannabis policy through my work to end mass incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, marijuana offenses and arrests have been driving mass incarceration in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was sort of the first battle. There's many more battles to come, but legalizing marijuana was a key step in getting people free and trying to reduce the racial discrimination inherent in our drug arrests and our criminal justice system. I should say our criminal legal system, because there's not a lot of justice in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just getting some comments from Facebook that they cannot hear you. So maybe unmute your computer so the folks that are in the computer on Facebook can hear you, but we can hear you perfect on Instagram.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
See, then it gives the feedback though.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna mute and unmute myself here as I do it. So if you guys have any questions for Lynne and for me on this 420 super quick chat, thank you for joining. One of the things that the reason why I came or we met actually is through a very good mutual friend of mine and ours Michael put us in touch. And, I have been doing my whole life, I have been doing environmental work. So I came to meet you through my environmental work and also my support for cannabis, which had a huge influence on passing Prop 64. So for those that just woke up today in 2020 and have no idea why they can go to any dispensary in California and buy cannabis if they're, at the right age, can you share with us a little bit of the process of how it came about legalizing cannabis?
Yeah, it's important. Thank you for the question, because it's so important that people know the history of cannabis legalization. A lot of people do, particularly in the, new people who've come into the industry, think that, it just happened, they were lucky and now there's a cannabis industry and you can get rich. But a lot of people have been fighting for this for decades.
Yeah.
A lot of people have lost their lives to this drug war, have been, raided, lost their businesses. So you could really trace the work back to the first ballot measure to legalize marijuana in California was in 1978.
Wow.
And that was unsuccessful. And then what happened was, with the sort of the crisis in the AIDS movement, and when it became clear that cannabis was, a critical treatment for people suffering with AIDS, with HIV and AIDS, there became a push for medical cannabis to be legalized, because there was an underground sort of railroad system of getting the medicine around. So in 1996, was the first state in the country to try to pass a medical marijuana legalization bill, and it went through. But the thing is that they never created regulations; they just legalized medical, and so recreational and all the rest of it was still illegal. And the next, just to speed up, there was a lot of work around that, but that was successful. And Drug Policy Alliance was involved in 1996 as well. In 2010. There was another ballot measure, Proposition 19, to legalize marijuana. And that was a hard-fought campaign led by folks out of Oaksterdam, up in Oakland. And it lost, very narrowly it lost. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor then, and there had been a marijuana possession decriminalization bill on his desk for a couple of years. And so he decided to go ahead and move that bill through to kind of take the wind out of the sails of the 2019 measure of Prop 19 in 2010. And so that one was unsuccessful. So in 2016, we really started working on it in 2014, but Drug Policy Alliance, where I was the California director, we, working with advocates and industry folks across the state, put together a ballot initiative to legalize recreational marijuana in California, and to simultaneously decriminalize all or nearly all cannabis violations, and to do so retroactively. And so that's what we did in 2016. Proposition 64, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. We were successful. I like to say it's a relay race, and there's been different people holding the baton during the different legs of this campaign. I was very lucky to hold the baton that went over the finish line. And so we fully legalized recreational marijuana in California in 2016.
I remember that night. It was super exciting. It was bittersweet, because I remember I went to celebrate with you the pass of Prop 64, and also Trump won. So,
bittersweet is an understatement.
Yeah, it was definitely bittersweet. One thing that I want to make sure that folks know is that even in 2015, 2016, when I met you and I started advocating more on the Latino community, on the environmental community, around cannabis, there was a huge stigma among people of color. In fact, especially Latinos. In fact, there were a lot of elected officials in Los Angeles, even included to the elected officials today, that were really a war against drugs, which I think is such an irony, because I'm Colombian and in a lot of ways the violence in the 80s and 90s from the drugs and the cartels was exacerbated because of the war against drugs.
Absolutely.
And I think the other aspect of this that people often don't think about is the fact that people of color are disproportionately most affected by criminalization of cannabis and drugs in general. That we are the ones that end up in jail first, that we're the ones that have the longest and the worst sentencing. And for me, cannabis wasn't just so much about smoking and, I mean, if you do it, no judgment, good for you. It actually has these medicinal properties that are incredible. But for me, it was a big point about a lot of people close to me, family members that have gone to through the criminal system because of cannabis. So can you talk a little about that aspect of how legalization help and decriminalization help people of color that have been disproportionately affected more by being targeted by the police and just in general the war against drugs?
Yeah, you have to remember that drug policy was created specifically to keep down certain racial populations. So each of our major drug laws in the United States was written and created around racism, very intentionally, not even subtly, right? Our first laws were our anti-opium laws, our anti-heroin laws in San Francisco. That was all about oppressing the Chinese. The 1937 Marijuana Tax Act would have never passed if it weren't for the anti-Mexican racism that was spewing out in all the major newspapers, was being pushed out of the federal government, the precursor to the DEA run by Harry Anslinger. And so, I mean, open racism being pumped out from the government, nothing new, but really, really open back then. So it's always been about oppressing people of color and poor people. It's never been about public health. And the statistics show it, because while white people, Black people, Latinos use and sell drugs at roughly the same rates, a couple little percentages here and there, but roughly the same, you are far more likely to be arrested, to be convicted, and to get a longer sentence if you're Black, and secondly, if you're Latino. And the numbers show it, whether you're looking at bail, whether you're looking at prisons, whether you're looking at California, whether you're looking at Massachusetts. It is institutional racism sort of working on a daily basis. So legalization didn't fix that problem. We didn't end racism. What we did was we reduced the opportunity for law enforcement to use a racist tool. So what you see is, while in California, one of the best outcomes of Prop 64 is in the first year after it passed, marijuana arrests dropped by 54%. They went down from about 14,000 a year down to about 6,000 a year. And, and they've been coming down ever since. So it's a huge reduction in the people who are being criminalized. Now, when you look at those numbers, the disparity by race still exists. You still have, again, African Americans being the population that is targeted for cannabis at the highest proportions. And so you still see the discrimination coming out in the numbers. It's just that there's fewer of them. So it's going to take a lot more than that to end that kind of racism.
Absolutely. And one of the things that people are actually on the comments saying is, people with green card holders lost their status here, got deported.
Yeah.
Some folks are asking, why was cannabis, why was cannabis illegal to begin with?
Yeah, so let me first say, really important, anybody who is not a citizen, even if you are a legal resident, admitting to using recreational cannabis in California or to having a medical marijuana card can get you deported. So anybody of any immigrant status should never admit that, even if you have full, like, a green card and residency. So because the federal government, until it's legalized federally, they'll still use that against immigrants. So just public service announcement, because of the question you mentioned.
Yeah.
So the reason it happened initially, this goes back to Harry Anslinger. He's one of the, he's the godfather of the war on drugs. And so he was the head of the Bureau of against alcohol and whatever it was called, the original
substance abuse, substances and such. Yeah.
It was really a bureau that was built during Prohibition, when we didn't have alcohol. Alcohol was illegal in the United States during the 20s, right? So when we ended Prohibition in 1929, he was going to lose his job because they didn't need a Bureau of Alcohol Control because they were legalizing alcohol. And so he needed a new drug. He needed a new thing to keep his agency alive. And so there was all of this. He kept hearing about, he'd already done a commission. He had commissioned a report on marijuana, and 24 of 25 academics came back and doctors came back and said it's not harmful to public health, and one of 25 said it was. And so he decided to use the advice of that one. He saw all the racism going on around the Mexican migrants, really, because California used to be Mexico and the Southwest was Mexico. I hate to use the word migrant in the 1920s. But these were, as we always had folks who came over and did the agricultural work. And so they used cannabis. And so that was, sort of culturally something that they brought with them. And so that is the people in the Southwest. If you go back and see some of the newspapers and the things that they said, they call them marihuanos. That's where the word comes from. The marijuana word is actually a racist word to begin with. It comes from this stereotype about lazy Mexicans using cannabis. And so basically Anslinger thought this racism is just what I need to make marijuana illegal, because the science wasn't there and the health records weren't there. And so he needed some, other push. And so that's how he got the Marijuana Tax Act, which was in 1937, which was the beginning of cannabis being illegal in the United States.
So a question that I'm getting in here on Instagram is, when is the classification going to change? And why is it taking so long for the federal government to change it?
Yeah, so that question's about the federal level. And so we all, I think if we had a Democrat elected president in 2016, I think that they would have descheduled. That's what we want. We don't want a reduction. We don't want to move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. We want to move from Schedule 1 off the schedule completely. And so we don't want anything in between, because that would give an unfair advantage to the pharmaceutical companies. So there's a push for it in Congress right now. Some people thought that Trump might sign it might support it because he's sort of a maverick, but he actually, he's even interested. So I think a lot will depend on who the next president is.
Wow. And that is, I think we can go on and on and on here for a while to talk about who our next president is going to be, but don't indulge me, please. But one of the questions that I have for you, that you have been so involved just at the state level and at the local level, is, and in LA, we have an equity provision around who gets licenses. So who is, in terms of regulating it, there is still a huge issue with illicit businesses opening up and the city not catching up and not being fair to other businesses that are standing in line, that are paying taxes. And it's an expensive business. I think we saw people thought about it as a green rush and such, but it's an expensive businesses, especially for small businesses. And now with COVID-19, that everything is shut down, even though cannabis stores are still open. What do you see coming up for Los Angeles in terms of regulation, and in terms of who gets these licenses, why they get these licenses, and how this is really going to be a fair chance for everyone, especially for people of color, where this equity measure was created for.
Well, the reason I'm laughing at you is because you just asked me 10 questions.
I know. I'm just trying to keep you here, like all afternoon.
I was
And who knows?
trying to
Maybe
pack in
we'll
my
see
head.
there's no angry person stage, so people know that I'm like, something is burning in this chat.
Okay, so many questions there. Let me see. Let me talk for a minute about cannabis social equity, because I don't think everybody knows what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk for a minute about it and what we tried to do in Prop 64 to lay this out. So the framing is to understand that, as I talked before about the arrests, and despite use and sales, we target certain people for the arrest, right? So because of that, we have a disproportionate number of people of color who have these convictions on their record.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a conviction on your record in the state of California, having a felony conviction, for example, is there's 47,000 legal rights you lose when you have a felony conviction on your record. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't be a barber, you can't be a dog walker, you can't be a bingo caller, you have to pay more in rent, you name it, right? So the first thing we did in Prop 64, and you can't get most occupational licenses if you have a conviction. So in Prop 64, we put in a provision that said, you cannot deny somebody a cannabis license based on their previous drug convictions of any kind, not just cannabis. Even if you have a heroin conviction, you cannot use that as a reason to deny somebody a license, because the idea is that these are the people who, first of all, have the most experience in the industry. They've been doing it illicitly. But secondly, these are the people who have been targeted by the system. And so we created a legal right to it. What the next step in social equity, and the idea behind social equity, is to try to even the playing field a little bit, to give people who have been intentionally and unfairly targeted, to give them space to participate in an equitable way, right? That's the idea here. And people of color have been unfairly targeted by the drug war and by marijuana prohibition specifically for 60 years. And so the idea was to create space for people with those backgrounds, with those drug convictions, and who've suffered in those communities that have been targeted by the war on drugs, to give them a way to get into the industry. That was the intention. So cities like LA and other cities, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Sacramento, those cities have already, created social equity programs, because you can only do that at the local level.
Right.
And the intention was to, if you could just set aside licenses for those folks who meet that criteria, that would be the easiest. But you can't, because in California, affirmative action is illegal. People don't know that, but it is.
I know.
We worked on that back in 2009. But I'm sorry, in not 2009, in wow, what year was that? Oh, it was Prop 209, sorry, in 1996. Sorry, that was when they made affirmative action illegal. So cities have to create complicated ways to get people who meet that criteria, who've been targeted by the drug war, to get them licenses. And so that's what the city of LA has tried to do. Right. It hasn't gone very well. Let's just be honest. It hasn't gone very well. And it didn't go very well in Oakland, and San Francisco's just getting started. Sacramento's just getting started. But so far, I'll say that no government has figured out how to do this right. So the intention is there to make sure that those individuals and those communities that have suffered the most from the war on drugs, that they get access to this green rush. The intention is there. What we haven't seen it work yet. So the reasons why it's not working are so complex, we can't get into it right now. And I got to get back to my 420 session soon. So, I got people to call. We got, 420s all over the world.
It's a celebration. I know it's a celebration. And I think, we're like almost on top of the half hour. I like to do my live streams short so that people can get a little bit of the info. But I don't want
Any
to.
last question from any of your listeners?
What's that?
Any last question from any of your listeners?
Well,
Yours?
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of questions around, like
Okay.
efforts to make to eliminate probable cause.
Ooh, they can't. So I see that question. So
Okay, you see the questions. Okay, good. I have some.
We already
I see
did
the other
that.
questions on the other chats. You see the ones on Instagram.
Now I see that. So Prop 64 already eliminated probable cause vehicle searches based on the smell of marijuana. So if anybody has a cop try to use the smell of marijuana to search their car, they should definitely contact the ACLU.
Wow, really? So if like somebody's smoking, if somebody's smoking in a car, you get stopped because for X reason, they cannot use that as a probable cause.
Well, no, yes. So first of all, if you can't have the joint on you, no open containers allowed while driving. But say you're parked, let's just say, because we want to say you're being legal, right? Say you're parked and you had smoked while you were parked, and they came by, they tapped your window, and they're like, I smell marijuana. You could say, great, isn't it a nice smell? What they can't do at that point, they can't say, we're going to search your car for drugs now. So that's where they can't use it. But yes, you can't be driving and smoking.
This is such a great info. I feel like we all walking out of this Smokeside chat a little more knowledgeable. I have one last question for you, and it's a little more on the 420, celebration. And we're in April. And is it April 20? Yeah, it's all 420 today.
It's a big one. It's 420, 2020, 2020.
I know. I feel like I needed to have like confetti and stuff like blowing or something. But I wanted to ask you, so what do you smoke? What do you like to smoke? And maybe for my listeners that don't know, like I use mostly cannabis, more so maybe more than recreational, maybe more for like when I can't sleep or when I'm restless. So right now it's so great because in California we have people that are experts on this, connoisseurs of cannabis, kind of like so many years I think of cannabis. And I heard in West Hollywood they're gonna start opening lounges where you can go and smoke, which I think is great because let me tell you, I feel like weed is way better than alcohol. Alcohol makes people do crazy things.
So I have to say that I'm from the Snoop Dogg school of thought, which says smoke weed every day.
Nice.
That is my mantra: smoke weed every day.
So what do you prefer? Are you an indica person? Are you sativa, so more relaxing or more like uplifting?
I love it all. I love it all. I grow cannabis in my backyard. I grow my 6 plants, which is our legal right because of Prop 64. We can all grow 6 plants. So I mainly smoke my own homegrown. I either smoke joints or I put it in my packs, but I really like the flower. I'm not big on the oils and the waxes and all of that. And so for me, it's a ritual. It's part of my wellness. It's part of my sanity. It allowed me to get rid of a bunch of pills in my life. But yes, it's just very important to smoke weed every day.
Nice. I have learned little by little more, and I think I'm more of a hybrid person, especially at the end of the day when I have been running around all the time. Now, if I have like a stomachache, also I smoke. I have not gone very big onto the edibles because it makes me crazy.
Yeah, you have to start slow. With edibles, you start very slow.
Yeah. And one thing that I want to leave people with, Lynne and I both are Harvard, mates. We all went to, Ivy League schools per se, we're both clearly very involved in our community. And we support cannabis, and we also utilize cannabis when we want to. This is not something that you're not going to burn in hell. This is not bad for you. A lot of people that see me and know that I'm a public figure, that I run for office, they think that this is a little provoking, cutting edge. And don't you want your elected officials to be honest about the consumption, and also if there's support, something to really support it all the way, that is not just lip service, but it's something that they actually do and practice. So I am very proud, and I'm not ashamed. Actually, even with my family, that we're Latinos, we're from Colombia, and there was a great stigma around smoking cannabis. And I told my mom, and I actually wanted my mom to smoke cannabis because I think it would be really great for her. And later when my grandmother got cancer and my dad got cancer, we kind of try to help them also deal with pain also through cannabis. So if I leave you with anything, this 420 is do what you love, and also get involved, get knowledgeable, educated on the things that are being fed to you by the news and by our government, because not all of them are what it seems they are. So some last thoughts for us, Lynn, before we go?
Well, no, I was just going to thank you for your courage in being an open cannabis consumer, because that's really part of this fight. We have to reduce the stigma. There is still 1.6 million marijuana arrests in the United States last year. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, 1.6 million drug arrests, and about 650,000 of them were for marijuana. So in addition to the criminalization across the country, there's so much stigma. So I really appreciate and admire your courage in coming out. I think it's important. I did that while I was running Drug Policy Alliance and getting ready to run this campaign. I had to begin to be comfortable talking about it. And I'm a mom, and I'm a single mom. And I was scared, about, because at that point they could still take your kids. We changed that in Prop 64. They can't ever take your kids based on your cannabis use. But, it was important to come out as the leader of the organization and as a mom, and to be like, like you said, it's like, I got my master's from Harvard. Cannabis doesn't make me stupid. I'm smart as fuck. So, Totally. And so I just, we got to break the stigma. And I think doing this 420 chat with you was kind of part of breaking the stigma, and also getting out important information to folks who may not know.
Absolutely. And I hope everyone today have a wonderful 420. Enjoy in whichever fashion you want to enjoy it. Lynn, I love you. Thank you so much for always being a supporter, a friend. Thank you for fighting a good fight for all of us. And I know that even though you're not with the Drug Policy Alliance anymore, we can always count on you. I know that in Twitter, sometimes I make comments and you very quickly educate me about, maybe the right terminology or even just the right ideas. So thank you. I appreciate you so much for all the work that you have done. If you don't know Lynn, you got to get to know her, because she was really the woman behind writing Prop 64 and getting everybody together to make sure that we today can enjoy cannabis that is being decriminalized, that is being given to the world in whichever Bob Marley fashion you want to say it, or a Snoop Dogg fashion you want to say it. We are so grateful to you. Thank you so much for all that you've done for us.
I'm
happy
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
I love you, and thank you so much. And thank you all for joining the live stream and for learning more about cannabis with Lynne and a little bit with me. Enjoy it today, and I see you again at 7 o'clock today, when I'm going to be talking about COVID-19 with a doctor in the front lines, where we're going to be also talking about the environment and acknowledging and celebrating also Earth Week or Earth Day. So thank you guys. Enjoy so much, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.